Hey everyone, welcome. Today, we're going to do a little detective work on one of the most basic parts of speech, the noun. Now, you might think you know them, but trust me, they are full of secret rules, hidden identities, and some really weird behavior. Let's kick things off with a mystery that seems to break all the rules. So, right out of the gate, here's our central mystery. How on earth can one thing, a football team, be both singular and plural at the exact same time? It just doesn't seem to make sense, right? Well, stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly what's going on. This little contradiction is our first big clue to unlocking the secret life of nouns. You know, every good investigation starts with a lineup. We need to identify our main suspects and get a feel for who they are before we can really dig into what they're up to. So let's meet the different kinds of nouns. Okay, first up, we've got the most basic division. On one side, we have concrete nouns. These are the things you can actually interact with in the real world. You can touch a flower, sit in a chair. Pretty straightforward. But then you've got the abstract nouns. These are things like ideas, feelings, or qualities. You can't physically touch justice or joy, but they are just as real in our language. Next, we need to separate the general from the specific. A common noun, like city, could mean any city on the planet. But a proper noun, like Algeria, refers to one very specific place. And what's the big giveaway? Proper nouns always get a capital letter. You can think of them as the VIPs of the noun world. And this brings us to our first major clue in solving that mystery from the beginning: collective nouns. Words like team or army or flock, they treat a whole bunch of individuals as a single unit. But as we're about to find out, this whole single unit idea is where things start to get really interesting and complicated. All right, so we've got our lineup. We've identified our suspects. But this is where the investigation gets tricky. We're now entering the world of countability, a concept that can be super confusing but is absolutely crucial for understanding how nouns really work. So what's the core difference? Well, countable nouns are pretty easy to get your head around. You can have one boy or two birds, you can count them, and they have a plural form. But uncountable nouns are different. They refer to stuff or concepts that you can't really count individually, like water or air. I mean, you'd never say one water or two sands, would you? This difference right here is a major fault line running through the world of nouns. And here is a classic trap, especially if English isn't your first language. All of these common nouns are uncountable in English, so you can't have informations or furnitures. It just sounds wrong. Instead, you have to talk about a piece of information or an item of furniture. It's a subtle rule, but it's a really important one. Now get ready for a bit of a mind bender. This simple sentence shows us that a noun's identity isn't fixed at all. It can actually switch sides from countable to uncountable depending on the context. See, the first glass is a countable object, something you drink from, but the second glass is the uncountable material it's made of. It's the same word, but it's playing two completely different roles. Okay, so now that we've wrapped our heads around countability, we can start to crack the code of how these nouns actually transform from singular to plural. And believe me, it's not always as simple as just sticking an S on the end. For most nouns, the rules are pretty reliable. Usually, you just add an S. If the word ends in a kind of hissing sound, like S, sh, or ch, we add ES, mostly just to make it easier to say. And then we have these specific little rules for words that end in Y and F. This is pretty much the standard procedure for making things plural. But then you have the rebels, the irregulars. These nouns just don't follow the rules at all. They have these really old forms that have somehow survived into modern English, and really, you just have to memorize them. Man becomes men, tooth becomes teeth. No shortcuts here, sorry. And if you thought that was weird, what about the nouns that refuse to change at all? You can have one sheep, or you can have 100 sheep, and the word just stays the same. The singular and the plural forms are exactly identical. These are kind of the stoics of the noun world. English is a language that loves to borrow words from other languages, and that includes borrowing their plural rules. A lot of words, especially in science and academia, actually keep their original Latin or Greek plurals. So one bacterium becomes many bacteria, and one criterion becomes multiple criteria. Okay, this is where our investigation takes a really fun turn. We're about to meet the imposters in the lineup. These are nouns that look like one thing, but they're actually something completely different, especially once they become plural. Let's start with a little puzzle. The word spirits, it probably makes you think of ghosts or maybe someone's mood, right? But it has another really common meaning that you're more likely to find in a bar. Any ideas? Well, the answer is that sometimes just adding an S creates a whole new word with a totally different meaning. For example, a custom is a tradition, but customs is that place you go at the airport where they check your bags. Same root word, but two completely separate ideas. And we see the exact same thing with the word glasses. Glass is a material, right? But glasses can either mean the cups you drink from or the spectacles you wear to see. It all comes down to context. Now, let's meet the crew that doesn't even have a singular identity. You just can't have a trouser or a scissor. It doesn't work. These nouns, which are often for things that have two main parts, only exist in the plural. If you want to talk about just one, you have to say something like a pair of scissors. And here's the flip side. Nouns that look plural because they end in S, but they actually act like they're singular. You'd say the news is good, not the news are good. And this is the final clue we needed. It brings us right back to our football team. See, when the team is acting as one single, unified group, it's treated as singular. The team is playing well. But when the members of that team start acting like individuals, like going off to take their own separate baths, we treat the noun as a plural. The team are having baths. And there you have it. Mystery solved. Okay, for the final stage of our little investigation, we're going to look at power and control. How do nouns show that they own something? This is what we call the possession puzzle, or more formally, the genitive case. Thankfully, the rules for showing possession are pretty clear. For a single owner, you just add an apostrophe and an S. If you've got plural owners and the word already ends in S, the apostrophe just goes on the end. And for those weird irregular plurals like men, they just follow the singular rule. Add an apostrophe, S. But even here, in this seemingly straightforward area, there's one last subtle twist. Take a phrase like the love of his wife. This creates a genuine mystery. What does it actually mean? Does it mean that he is the one doing the loving, or does it mean that he is the one being loved by his wife? The sentence itself doesn't tell us, leaving the true meaning hidden in how we interpret that noun. So there we have it. We've seen that nouns are so much more complicated than they first appear. They can be rule followers, rebels, and even masters of disguise. The rules we've gone over today are really just a snapshot of a living, breathing, evolving system, which of course makes you wonder, which of these rules do you think is going to be the next one to change?